starting to work on the hoodie kind of robe item. So the first thing that I did was I cut off some material to work with because I have 5 yards. And from one side to the other is about 23, 24 inches. So I'm only going to be able to cut 2 sides on a folded piece. The back is going to have to be cut out of one whole piece because the gentleman has a 60-inch chest. So I'm going to need a little more than just the 60 inches, of course, because we want this to be kind of big. So seeing as how this material is very loose weave, I had to, whatever piece that I cut off, I had to go through and straighten it. And fortunately, I don't know if you can see this, but there are grid lines, which hallelujah for that. So I was able to cut all the edges nice and straight. I ironed them first, then cut the edges. And at this point now, I have, welcome to Columbus. When you live near downtown, that's what happens. Anyway, so I then went through and pinned the sides together so that they're not going to shift before I try to cut out the front. Okay, so lucky break, I happened to remember that I had this ladies 5X suit that I have not sold yet. And I took the tank top to use to trace out the neck. I measured this. He has a 20-inch neck. So this was like 8 to 9 inches. So I just moved it down. I added about 2 inches. So that should be good for the neck. This is going to be across the shoulders. Again, I measured a blazer which would be bigger than a tank top, was 6.5 inches. So I made it 8.5. And then I needed the armhole right here. So I moved it down about 2 inches and then carved the armhole. So that is how I used this tank top as somewhat of a pattern so that way I could have my curves to trace. Okay, here we go. I now have the front panels cut out. Now I need to take the material, next piece, open it up, iron it, and then lay this on top to make the back piece. And he also wants a hood. So I'm going to want the back piece probably cut straight across. I would rather do that and then adjust it if I need to and cut off any excess. Rather have too much than not enough. And then I also kind of did like an angle to where this will flow out a little bit more. I hope I'm doing this right. Okay, next step that I did, I cut a large piece open, of course. And then I put the front pieces on side by side, lined everything up. Of course, I trimmed the previous fabric, make sure it was straight, because this material likes to move. I took the 2 front pieces, pinned them on, and now I'm going to cut out all the way around except for the neck, maybe just a tiny little bit in the neck because he wants a hood attached. And then I will cut out the back piece and start to sew everything together. Okay, so for the hoodie, I'm going to double it up. So I have the material folded in half like it normally would be, and ironed it, and then folded in half again. So this is going to be the front of the hoodie, or the hood, on a fold. And then I just took another one. I measured the base of the neckline, which is 12 inches, and then I added a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then I took a hoodie from a sweatshirt and laid it in place and took chalk and drew a line. So now I'm going to cut this part out and turn it inside out and stitch it up. And then I will attach it to the completed cloak, robe, vest, duster, whatever you want to call it. Everything has been hemmed all along the collar, the front, the armholes. Okay, that worked out well. So once I cut it out, I just stitched and then found the center of the back and pinned it all the way from side to side. And now I'm going to stitch it on. Okay, we are in the kitchen and I'm going to give this garment a week dye bath in black because the client wanted black and gray, and this is more gray and a kind of light gray. So I just need to darken this a little bit. So I have my pot of water, I have my black dye, my tongs, and I just want to do a week bath. So I'm just going to put in a half a tablespoon to tablespoon of dye each time and then test it with a swatch. So I dipped part of this swatch into the dye bath. I added 1 teaspoon of dye to this pot of water and it literally grabbed within seconds because I only had this in for like maybe 10 seconds. This is the before, this is the after, and to me that definitely looks like more of the black and gray, like what the client wanted. I sent him a video of this to get his approval, and I'm just waiting for a response at this point. Okay, next up is to put the wet fabric into the dye bath. I moved it to my sink so that way I'm not dripping water or anything anywhere. Of course, I have my gloves on, so I'm just going to transfer this into the pot and then put it back on the stove. Okay, so what I ended up having to do is get 2 pots because I was doing such a weak bath that it was sucking up the color so fast. So I would transfer from one pot to the other, add more dye to one pot, transfer it back in, section by section, taking note of any areas that were lighter. And I pretty much feel like I've got it pretty even. So I added more dye, a little bit more dye to this water, and then transferred into the other pot with the dye that was in this pot, and now it's sitting on top to keep it submerged. And I'm going to check it here in a few minutes. Okay, I think I am pretty much done. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the fabric section by section. Make sure that it's even, and that is definitely looking more even than it was because I want the white to be a light gray and the black to be black. And it is all looking pretty good. And of course it will be a little bit lighter when it's dry, so we don't want to overdo it. But I think we're fairly even. Oh, nope, it's like this back spot right here. So I'm going to stick this back in for a little bit, but I think the rest of it is pretty much even. Such a huge garment, and I don't have a dye pot big enough. This is what I have to use. So I'm gonna let this sit for about, I don't know, 2 to 5 minutes because it's almost there. And this material, I believe, because it's cotton, is just sucking up the dye. I kept having to transfer back and forth and add more dye because my water was literally getting clear. So, all right, we're gonna let that sit for a little longer and check it in a couple minutes. All right, now we're going to the laundry room and I'm going to put this in the washer, give it a spin and a rinse, and then dry it. Okay, the saga that I went through with this piece. So when I first dyed it with just the black, the white spots had a purple cast to them. So no bueno. So I emailed RIT and asked them how to fix it. I sent them a picture or a little video snippet, and they said to re-dye it and add yellow, lemon yellow to the mix to counteract the purple, because if you know anything about the color wheel, that's the color wheel. That's the color that cancels out purple, is yellow. So I ordered some online. I got it, and I accidentally ordered neon yellow, but I figured yellow's yellow, right? It should work. So I dyed it again, and it still came out purple. It didn't look any different. It looked darker when I put it in the machine to rinse it and spin it, and I think my mistake was that I rinsed it. So it came out purple again. Didn't even look like it was any darker. I think I rinsed all of the dye out. So that was like an hour and a half wasted. So the second time that I dyed it, I did the same thing. I did the black with the yellow, let it sit. And then when I put it in the washer, I only spun it and then put it in the dryer. And now it is perfect. Let me show you. So there we go. There is no purple cast whatsoever. And of course, this is going to look lighter on the camera because of the bright, bright light. But I just want to show that there's no purple cast whatsoever, even when I look at it in the natural light in front of the window. So now, today, I'm going to put on a TV show or a movie and begin hand stitching the dragon scale on and get this piece finished. Okay, this is the dragon scale that we chose. It's kind of like a copper, like a rose gold. So it's kind of like a copper and pink kind of cast. You can see that. So it's like color changing. So super cool. The 3D printing that the person made for me, the first one didn't come out so well because it had, and I don't think I have it anymore, I've got it somewhere else. Anyway, it was attached to where I couldn't clip and make the shapes that I wanted. So he had to reprint and make sure that he used a pattern to where I could cut through this netting, because we are going to do something where it's, how are we going to do it? It's going to be shorter in the front, so this is going to be toward the back, and then I'm going to piece this together, cut it and piece it together, so it's actually going to go at an angle on the shoulder. So it's going to be shorter on the shoulder and longer in the front, and you'll see what I mean once I get all this cut and pieced together before I start stitching. All right, I now have the dragon scale all pieced together and cut. So this will be on the left if you're looking at it, or the right, and then this will be on the other side. So these will go on to the shoulders. So now I'm going to hand stitch all the way around and then trim off if there's anything I need to trim off. Okay, I got the one side finished yesterday, and there is a certain way that this needs to be stitched on. So first of all, I did have to go through and piece it together because the printer and I weren't sure how we were going to put the design on. So he just like printed a bunch of stuff, and then I ended up creating a design, and I cut and glued the mesh together on the back. Now, in order to stitch this on, because this material is a loose weave, so it likes to move a lot, it was very hard for me to try to hold it and stitch it and make sure that it was straight. So the way that I have to sew this on is I have to lay it flat on my ironing board and sit in my little seat with the light right up on it, because it's black net and black thread. and I have to kind of do like a backwards stitch. So I kind of have to sew backwards because the mesh is so open. And I will go across the top. I have my little cutting pad underneath so I don't sew it to my ironing board. And I have one across the top. Then I will go down the side and this way, and then I will stitch as close to the printing as I can, and then I will clip off the excess netting. But I learned on the first one that when I cut the pieces, I needed to add more netting on the bottom, on the back, so that way it would hang down below, and then I would have something to stitch this to. So the first one, definitely a learning curve, but yeah, so I have to make sure that this stays extremely flat and even in order to stitch this on. So that's where I am now. Okay, there we are. It is completed. Please do not mind my mess behind. I'm working in a very small space. And due to the fact that this item is a size 5X, I do not have a mannequin that fits this item. So it is very much pushed on to the shoulders of the mannequin, but I just did that to be able to see the detail. So there is the dragon scale. It is stitched on all the way around. I did do some trimming as much as I can, but I don't want to trim too much more because I don't want the threads to come loose. But it is black, so it will blend in a little bit. Now this is the first side, so there's less. Okay. So there's a little less of the netting. But I learned that I need to make sure that I have enough of a perimeter of the netting in order to stitch this on. Could I have glued it on? Yes. Between the netting and the natural fiber, the glue would have stuck for sure. But in the event that he wants to wash this, that would have been a disaster. And there you have it, another custom piece completed. This was definitely a challenge, and I learned a lot as far as working with dragon scale material. I did try to check some YouTube tutorials, and I couldn't really find anything on how to sew it on. So my only option was to hand stitch it on. I did time myself on the second one. Once I figured out what I need to do as far as laying it flat. So on the second one, to prevent the material from moving, I did put a little bit of hot glue underneath of the backs of the dragon scale pieces to hold them into place, because as I said, with that loose weave material, it wanted to move and shift whenever I tried to hold it up to stitch it. So I did find that that helped. So I did learn and figure things out along the way. Would I work with 3D printing again? Possibly. Maybe something a little flatter. Maybe something not as thick. I don't know. I guess it depends on what is asked of me. Now, I do have some pieces left over right here. So what I did, just kind of playing around, I took 4 pieces and cut all of the netting off of it and hot glued it to the back of some felt. And I think I'm going to try to figure out how to make a dragon scale earring, because I thought that would be kind of cool, just to be able to use up the leftovers. So we'll see how that goes over. You never know. You never know what somebody is going to like. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for following along on this adventure, sourcing and assembling 2 custom pieces that were requested by 2 local musicians. So I'm very, very happy and very proud of that. I can't wait to see them on. I am hoping that I will be able to finish both of the videos with the musicians actually wearing the pieces, trying them on, and getting their reaction. So that may or may not come before or after this ending. I'm not sure at this point. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have a custom item that you have in your head, share your vision with me and I will see if I can make it come to life. And until next time, love, peace, and thrift, and we'll catch you on the flip side.